As a kid, all I ever wanted was to grow up, to get to move out of the house and face the world on my own. But now that I'm on the other side, I've realized that I missed one crucial thing. This week, I'll be going home to visit my family for the first time in over 8 months. There's always a huge mix of emotions for me on these trips. Sometimes I find it hard to conceptualize the fact that life still goes on in the places you leave behind, and with that comes change. When I visit home, I find myself wanting to come back to familiarity, but every time I come back, it feels like more and more of it's gone. And so, I guess with this video, I'm trying to capture some of what's left of the things that played a big part in my early childhood and teenage years. Maybe this is just a way for me to cope with all the change that's gone on at home, but I want to have something to look back on and maybe even show my kids one day. And so with that, we start this journey at Austin Bergstrom International. When I made it to Austin, I didn't actually have a ride home. My mom was on a work trip and everyone else had gone with her for the day, so I was kind of stranded. Luckily, I was able to call my friend Eric from high school and he was down to pick me up and give me a ride home. On the way, we stopped at the best fast food burger spot in the world, Whataburger. Don't fight me on that. Catching up with Eric was great. We got to reminisce on old times and also fill each other in on what's new. We talked about so many old stories from back in the day that I had almost completely forgotten about. We've been friends for over 10 years now, and I've noticed it's like, even if we only get to see each other once or twice a year, after all this time, things still feel the same when we do finally get to meet back up again. This definitely wasn't what I expected the beginning of my visit to look like, but I can't say I was disappointed.
For the ride, Eric.
Well, we have made it home, but nobody is here. My mom is on a work trip in San Antonio, so she won't be here for the next few days, and everyone else at the house went with her, so I'm kind of alone here. But I will say, I do have someone very special to go see now, so I'm gonna go hop in my car, which I haven't driven in like 8 months. So let's go. This very special person that I'm talking about is my grandma, but I call her Nana, and so does everyone else now. Usually, if it ever comes up in conversation, I tell people I was raised by a single mother, but in reality, it was more like my mom and Nana. When my mom unexpectedly got pregnant with me, she decided to move back home to Austin and asked my Nana if she'd be willing to help take care of me while she was at work. So while my mom was often working all through the day and sometimes late into the night, I would be with Nana, and this lasted pretty much up until I was in high school. We don't really have the typical grandparent-grandchild relationship. I would say it's more somewhere in between grandparent and just regular parent because of how much time we've spent together, and we're still very close to this day. I call her all the time and let her know what I'm up to. Oftentimes, I'll be frustrated or upset about something, and it feels like she always just knows what to say. Coming back here always feels very special for me. For one, I probably spent more time here than at my own house when I was little, but also it just feels so familiar to me. All the little knickknacks, the collectible dolls, the stray cats who always seem to find their way here somehow. Everything is just how it was when I left for New York. Except for one thing. Today is August 6, 2023. It's my uncle's birthday today. He would have been 60 years old. This is my first time coming home since he's passed, and things definitely feel different without him. He lived with my grandma who took care of me my entire childhood, so we spent a lot of time with each other throughout the years. He lost his life back in February due to cancer. I come from a big family of smokers, and unfortunately, it caught up with Pawpaw in the end. On paper, he might not have looked like the best role model for me growing up, but when I look back at my childhood, he's one of the most important figures I had. He's the one who introduced me to rock music when I was about 3 years old, and only a few years later, I started learning to play guitar, which grew into a huge passion of mine. I remember he had this globe in his room, and we would play this game where you would spin it and put your finger somewhere on it, and wherever the globe stopped, we would imagine that we would get to go on vacation there. When I got a bit older, we'd stay up late and talk for hours, and I really only started to remember this after he passed. He taught me so much about life back in those days. We'd have some pretty heavy discussions, the type of things that most adults would probably shy away from when talking to a kid. But that was the thing about Pawpaw. He never really treated me like a kid. He talked to me just as he would with anyone else. I always knew that he meant what he said when he said it, and I could tell that he cared a lot about me. If you can't already tell, this has definitely been hard on me, but I can only imagine what it's been like for Nana. She'd always tell everyone in the family, "You're not allowed to go before me, but clearly the universe sometimes has other plans. You know, I miss these dinners so much, and coming back home still feels very special, but it's just a bit harder when it feels like you've lost a part of it for good.
Did they get you to train your heroes for ghosts? Hot ashes for trees.
Alright, so I'm headed to my old high school today. All throughout high school, I was in band. I was a percussionist for the orchestra and wind ensemble. And then during marching season, I was in the drum line. And for me, like, band was my entire world. I loved every bit of it. And so today, my high school band has a practice as part of their band camp, which they do every summer. And there's some people I want to go say hi to. I don't think I can really even begin to express just how invested I was in this activity throughout high school. Like, there were times where this was the only thing that used to get me excited to go to school in the mornings. I learned so much from band, not just as a musician, but also as a person. I remember our band director would always tell us that what we had here was special, but I never fully understood what he was saying until after I graduated. Back when I was in high school, I competed at some of the highest levels. I was so focused on trying to be the best, and because of that, I think sometimes I lost sight of the bigger picture. We had a slogan back when I was in band. It was Pride, Passion, Family. And I know I had the pride and passion part down, maybe a bit to my own detriment sometimes, but what I took for granted was the amazing community of people that I had kind of unintentionally created throughout those 4 years. It was only after leaving that I realized I had been a part of a very special thing, something that I think many people have probably never experienced in their lives. Sometimes I wish I could go back and relive this for just one more day. It reminds me of the Andy Bernard quote, "I wish there was a way to know you were in the good old days before you actually left them." But you also have to consider the fact that you might be in a new era of the good old days right now, and it's important to try and remember that. It makes you so much more appreciative of your current situation when you're able to look at the bigger picture like that. And while it does sometimes make me sad to think about the fact that I probably won't ever be involved in music or marching band in the way I was before, I also have to remember that I was super lucky to have found something that I was as passionate about in the first place, and just because something good has ended doesn't mean there isn't something better waiting for me in the future. So I believe it's day 5 now of me being in Texas, and this entire time that I've been here, my mom's been away on a work trip, so I haven't even gotten to see her. I've got, I believe, 4 days left until I go back to New York, so I'm glad we have at least a little bit of time to spend together before I go back to New York and then to Europe for the next few months. But yeah, it's gonna be good to see her, that's for sure. I feel like there's so many things I could say about my mom, but maybe the best place to start is back in 2001. She had just found out she was pregnant, but this wasn't exactly exciting news at the time. The thing is, I was a complete accident, and it's funny because when I tell people this, they're like, "Oh, you shouldn't say that," but it's the truth. My parents were never married, they actually only dated for a few months. The last thing on their mind was having a kid together, and literally only a few days after breaking up, my mom started feeling strangely sick, and after getting a positive pregnancy test back, she knew everything was about to change. I think the first emotion for her was panic. It was just so unexpected, and my mom was in no place to raise a kid at the time, but then after she had some time to think things through, it was like everything clicked for her. She's told me that in that moment, she knew she was gonna have to leave almost everything about her old life behind and start completely fresh, so she moved back home to Texas from New York and got the first job she could find. The first year we lived with my grandma, but it was my mom's goal to buy her own house before my first birthday party, and somehow she actually made it happen. I also remember that as busy as she was with work, especially in those early years, she basically spent every other waking moment she had doing things with me. Every weekend she'd ask me, "All right, what do you want to do?" And whatever it was, she'd make it happen. I remember on these excursions, it was always just the two of us, so we would just talk, and years later, she told me that she was doing this on purpose. She said there were so many nights when we'd be driving back home from the city, and all she wanted to do was relax and turn on the radio, but she would just talk to me about literally anything. Apparently, she had heard somewhere that talking to your kids was one of the best things you could do for their brain development, so sometimes she would ask me the most random questions just to try to get the ball rolling. And actually, when I was born, I was put in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit, because I was having these seizures and there was a section of my brain that just wasn't working. So my mom tried extra hard to sort of make up for that, I guess. And you know, I think it kind of worked. Sometimes we would talk about some pretty deep stuff, especially for a 5-year-old, and I feel like it got me thinking about a lot more than I would have on my own at that age. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going with all this, but I guess the point is my mom's done a lot for me, and I wish I had realized this earlier. Now I feel like when I do have the chance to see her, I'm a lot more grateful for the opportunity. So I guess in this case, distance really does make you start to appreciate the things you used to take for granted. When I come back home, it never feels like it's long enough. There's always one more thing I want to do, one more person I wish I could see. Having your life split in two can be really difficult sometimes. I mean, it's amazing, but the goodbyes can be so tough. When I leave, there's always this feeling of anxiety that things won't be the same when I come back. Like, how long do I have until it just doesn't feel like home anymore? It makes me wish I could just be in both places at once all the time, but unfortunately that's a trade-off we'll always have to make. I loved getting to spend time with my friends and family. There's so many people back at home that I'm so lucky to have in my life. I guess I'm just the type to get super sentimental when I look back at my childhood, and maybe that's a good thing. Looking back on my journey and all the changes I've gone through in life has really taught me to appreciate the present moment. The good old days may have passed, but that's okay because I know I still have so much to look forward to. This trip has made me feel so grateful for the life I've lived. It's one that's been filled with plenty of ups and downs, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Before I end this video, I just want to thank those of you who are still watching up to this point. This one's taken me a very long time, and there were so many hurdles on the way to finishing it. It's probably the most personal video I've ever made, and it wasn't getting easy through some parts. So if you are still here, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to give it a watch. I really, really do appreciate it. And with that, you can expect to see more from me soon. So as always, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Don't you grow up in a hurry. Your mama be worried. Oh, it was all part of the story. Even the scary nights, thank you for all of the glory. You will be remembered.